putting together my talk over the last week or so, obviously I was online a bit and I started to notice that I was getting targeted with ads for, red rice, yeast and bran oil and all these different potential supplements that could help with heart disease and with menopause. So what I would love for you to get out of today from my talk is just in terms of heart health and menopause to feel like you're going away with some evidence-based information, that you feel a bit more in control, and that it's a minefield out there in terms of the misinformation. Everyone has an opinion on nutrition, so I'm hoping to kind of push through all that and kind of give you practical strategies that you can take away from today. So we're going to talk about the link between menopause and heart disease and stroke, how to reduce your risk. We'll go through a couple of practical resources and different supports that are available, and then questions at the end when we're doing all the questions. But as I think both, I think Aoife and Ciara, you both mentioned about heart disease and stroke. 1 in 4 women die from heart disease and stroke, which often surprises people because we think of heart disease and stroke as a man's disease. And you mentioned earlier as well that 6 times more women die from heart disease and stroke than breast cancer. And it's not to pit the two against each other because they're both important medical issues. However, it's great that we're seeing a lot of advocating and conversations about women's health issues in the last couple of years, but it does tend to be focused on what I call the bikini organ, so breast and cervical, etc. And we forget that heart health and heart disease is a huge women's health problem as well, and that the reasons behind that really are that it's under-recognised, it's under-diagnosed and it's under-treated. So in terms of under-recognition, women themselves get more vague heart attack signs. You might not get the classic Hollywood style pain down your left arm or you're clutching the chest. It might be nausea, fatigue, anxiety, even pain in your jaw, so much more vague. Women also have more women-specific symptoms, so pregnancy-related ones, menopause-related risk factors, and also risk factors, so the lifestyle risk factors that Aoife and Ciara were mentioning there. Smoking, for example, that's 2 times more, it's twice as dangerous for women than men. So we see twice the number of development of heart disease and stroke from smoking. Same with high blood pressure and with diabetes as well. So risk factors for women tend to be more dangerous for women than they are for men. Also underdiagnosis, so I think we all know that there's a huge underdiagnosis in heart disease and stroke amongst women. 50% of women presenting with chest pain get sent home from the emergency department, or it's misdiagnosed. So we see a lot more late diagnoses and therefore late referrals, less access to treatment. We see women waiting twice as long as men to get a diagnosis of heart failure. So these are all, society level gender inequalities. And all the treatments, many of the treatments we have available for heart disease and stroke were actually centered around male-based studies. So there's the classic one about the aspirin for heart disease that had 22,000 participants, not one of them was female. So it just puts it into perspective how, we've heard that theme across the morning already, that there just hasn't been enough research focus in this area. But while it is very common in women, it is very preventable. So 80% of heart disease and stroke, early heart disease and stroke is preventable just through lifestyle changes alone. So that's really what we're going to focus on today. And as was mentioned earlier, changes happen around the menopause that influence our risk of heart disease and stroke. So we see a decline in our estrogen levels, which is the primary reason why we see the cardiovascular side effects around this time. So estrogen tends to keep our blood vessels nice and soft and open and flexible. So when we see that drop in estrogen, we see stiffening of our arteries. So we see less flexible blood vessels. So you're more likely to develop high blood pressure. You're also more likely to get the high cholesterol that you were mentioning just there. And also then hot flushes, night sweats, sleep problems, depression. There's a link between those and your increased risk of heart disease and stroke. But also you can imagine that if your mood is on the floor and you're not sleeping at night, how that's also going to affect your food choices every day, how much motivation you have to actually get out for a walk, to engage socially, all of that. And also changes in body weight and shape and our muscle mass and fat mass. So all of the whole change in body composition as well. We also see that there's a higher risk for women if they experience an early menopause, so anything before the age of 45. So what can you do? Number one is to understand your risk. So first of all, be aware. Now there are some risk factors that we can't change. So our age, unfortunately, gender, our family history, our race or ethnicity, if you've had a previous heart event, if you have diabetes, but there's lots that we can do. And you can see the list for what you can do is so much longer, which is a good sign. So whether you smoke, whether you have high blood pressure, do you have high cholesterol, are you carrying excess weight, particularly on your abdomen around the middle? How is your diet looking? Do you have a diet that's very high in alcohol, physical activity, stress? And if you do have type 2 diabetes, is it well controlled or not? So there's a lot we can do there. And obviously I'm a dietitian, so I'm going to be biased and focus more on the food as we go through this. But before we do that, because that's often what we do, we dive into making changes, but we forget about the behavior change aspect of it all. So getting your head into the right mindset for change is probably the most important step when it comes to making lifestyle changes, because as I said, we're bombarded with so many nutrition messages. It's really overwhelming to know, where do I start? What's important for me? So you'll see, I think there's some at the back, ironically right beside the croissants. I didn't plan that.
There's one in each bag.
They're also in the bag. So as part of the Irish Heart Foundation's Her Heart Matters campaign, we developed this self-care and wellbeing journal, and in it there is a section looking at understanding your habits, asking yourself different questions like, am I happy with my heart health? Why is it important to me to improve it? So understanding the importance in your life. How confident do I feel that I can make those changes? And there's a couple of questions you can go through, and I won't go through them here. You can kind of do it in your own time, but it really helps you to zone in on, okay, do you know, I actually have the food side of things down, but I'm sleeping rubbish at the moment, and that's really maybe where I want to focus on. So it'll help you to hone in on exactly what you'll benefit most from focusing on a little bit more. And then thirdly, making heart healthy changes to your diet. So this is kind of what I want to spend the most time talking about today. Change is not easy, but hopefully I'm going to bring some practical strategies here that will land with you. And before we get into it, I just want to talk about certainly like the social media culture of, I get a lot of people saying, oh, can I eat this? Can I eat that? Is this good or bad? And it's very black or white, and it's very exclusion. So what do I need to cut out? Whereas the most important thing when it comes to heart health actually is what are you not including? So often we're not giving our bodies the fuel that we need to protect ourselves now and also into the future. So we'll talk a lot about that, but on that line, it's not a heart healthy diet is not necessarily a low fat diet. The Mediterranean diet, as you mentioned earlier, is the best evidence that we do have for preventing and managing heart disease in women. It reduces your risk of heart disease and stroke and death from all-cause mortality by 25%. And that's on a huge study based on over 700,000 women. So it's really, really strong evidence. And also it does show, which I love, is that even if you have the few treats and chocolate and crisps on top, if you have the solid foundation of a Mediterranean style diet, that in itself is protective somewhat against the extras. So instead of saying, oh, I've had X, Y, and Z that I maybe shouldn't have had, can you still try to make sure that you're including the foods that are going to protect your heart health going forward. And I'm sure, have you seen this before? I'm sure we all have. A lot of nods there. Very, very simple. It's called the plate model. And I know it's not groundbreaking, but I swear if you get even half, like 50% of this, or if you get this right 50% of the time even, that's honestly about 90% of the job done. So what we're talking about is having half your plate full of fruit, vegetable, salad, a quarter of your plate from protein foods, and choosing a high fibre, starchy carb as well. So you're kind of getting a little bit of everything. And if you have it with any type of sugar-free drink, so it can be water, milk, decaf tea, decaf coffee, or caffeinated if you prefer. If you can do that 3 times a day, that is honestly the vast bulk of it. So just to dig into kind of what foods do we need to be making sure we're including to protect our heart health. No surprises here, dietitian talks about fruit and vegetables, but it's true. They're needed not only for your heart health, but also minerals-wise for your bone health as well. So it's kind of a double positive effect here. And make life easy on yourself. The amount of frozen varieties they have out there right now, even like pre-chopped onions I saw the other day, you can make life easy on yourself. One thing I can't bear to do is chopping up or peeling a butternut squash. I don't have time, and it drives me insane. So just make it work for you. And I mean, even if, just going back to the previous slide, even if you're not, even if you're ordering a takeaway, can you add on an extra bit of fruit and veg to just bring it closer to this ratio? You don't have to get it right 100% of the time. It's just making that start, moving towards that ratio. When it comes to your whole grain foods, so we should eat some kind of starchy whole grain foods. So if you can, try choose higher fibre. So, porridge, oats, brown bread. There's loads out there. It's about finding what you actually enjoy eating and building that in. Really important, not only for your gut health, for your weight management, for your appetite, your regulating your satiety, but also to help manage your cholesterol as well. So everyone always talks about protein, nowadays. And I'm like, fibers, where's that? Fiber is the most important thing. I think between 8 or 9 out of 10 of us are deficient in fiber across Ireland. So if we could do one more thing, it's getting more greens, beans, whole grains into our diet. And then when it comes to protein, I know I'm talking about heart health here, but it's also important from a bone point of view. So women, when one of the main roles of protein in our body is growth and repair. And women after the age of 30, we really need to be fueling our muscles and our bones regularly. So the importance of having a regular meal pattern that includes protein throughout the day is so important, not just for your satiety, so keeping you fuller so if you have a good protein breakfast, let's say, you're less likely to snack in the evening time. And our bones and our muscles really need to be fed about 3 to 5 hours, every 3 to 5 hours. So we tend to be really good at dinner, with our portion of meat or fish or whatever it might be. Lunch can be hit or miss. We're never great on breakfast in Ireland. So maybe if there's one change you could focus on today for you, that might be, if that sounds like you, that could be maybe adding a little bit more protein into your breakfast. And so in terms of the types of protein foods, so when it comes to, there's a lot of talk about red meat and all that. It's fine to eat red meat. We just say in terms of bringing balance to the plate, try and make a little bit of space for your plant-based protein. So your peas, beans, lentils, if you can, so you're getting extra fibre in there. Try to limit your red meat to maybe twice a week. The unprocessed one, much better, and try to limit your processed red meats or your processed meats like your sausages, rashers, bacon. And when it comes to fish as well, if you can include that twice a week and at least one portion of oily fish, again, great for your heart health. Then dairy, so milk, yogurt and cheese. Most of us get about 1 to 2 portions a day. The guidelines are about 3 portions. So Doesn't really matter if you choose low fat or full fat, it's up to you. So a lot of the evidence now shows for the general population, it doesn't really matter. If you do have high cholesterol, it might be an idea to maybe choose more of the low fat, but again, it's probably one of the things we change the last because they're such nutritious foods that there's often more important things to focus on. So if you are plant-based as well, just make sure you go for an unsweetened version that is fortified with at least calcium. There's a few other nutrients that you won't be getting from your plant-based milk, so just to be aware of that as well. And then your healthy oils, nuts and seeds. So talking about heart-healthy fats, we can dig into that now in a second. But really from here, it's the question we want to ask is that they're the basics, okay? So they're the standard foundations of a heart-healthy diet. But then from there, you need to think about what's your priority? Is it lowering your cholesterol? Is it lowering your blood pressure? Is it changing your body composition? So maybe building lean muscle mass and reducing fat mass. So if it's lowering cholesterol, so heart healthy fat swaps. So for example, for spreads, instead of going for butter, you can either go for a low fat spread or one of the ones based on olive oil or sunflower oil. If you're not a fan of those and you want to go with kind of more natural options, you can go with, avocado, pesto, olive tapenade, any type of nut butter. There's a huge amount out there. It's kind of what would you prefer? If you're frying, so instead of using butter or coconut oil, can you choose olive oil, rapeseed oil, both heart healthy oils? And can you, for nuts and seeds, so they are another heart healthy fat to include. So just a handful of nuts every day will reduce your bad cholesterol, your LDL cholesterol, by about 3 to 5%. So really easy change to make. So another kind of easy, quick win. And then also with your ultra processed foods, so the chocolates, the crisps, the things that are really hard for us to resist because we're all human. Instead of saying just eat less, which doesn't work. I always think the most helpful way to tackle that, if it's a problem for you, is to map out that habit. So in that journal that's in your pack, we have a section on mapping out your habits. So, if you're snacking on that regularly, what's driving you to do that? Understanding what the triggers are for you helps you to, and also mapping out what the effect of that is. So pros and cons, it might make you feel full and gives you pleasure, it's enjoyable to eat, but it might lead to higher cholesterol, higher blood pressure, weight gain. And simply by mapping it out, it allows you to kind of stand back objectively and see, right, is there any other way I could be addressing that trigger more? So often you find, when you're stressed out or really tired, that's when things, that's when your willpower is low, and it's putting those systems in place to make sure on days like that you have, nourishing snacks you're actually going to enjoy there for when you need a little pick-me-up, or making sure that you're not, really, really starving, because that's when we always reach for the sugary stuff, especially when you're shopping. Then functional foods. So other ways we can lower our cholesterol is to add in, we mentioned fibre already and whole grains, but oats and barley in particular are really good. They're high in beta-glucan, which is a sticky soluble fibre, which will help to lower your cholesterol. Nuts, as we said earlier. Plant stanols are sterols. So the yogurt drinks or the little yogurt pots, they can lower your cholesterol by about 6 to 12%. And soya foods, to a certain extent, and I'm glad you kind of mentioned the nuance of it earlier, because you need to take around 100 grams a day of soya protein, which is quite a lot, and it also needs to take about 2 to 3 months to actually see an effect, which is a long time to commit to that. And also there's now research to show that some women will have a positive effect of having soya foods, but some won't, and often it's down to your microbiome. So really, really interesting. So can work somewhat for some people, but there are a range of ideas there for cholesterol. When it comes to blood pressure then, so limiting salt, Not so much the salt on the table. It doesn't really matter in Ireland, unless you're adding a huge amount to your foods. But generally, we get about 80% of the salt we eat from our foods already. So it's the ultra-processed foods, it's the salty meats, the processed meats, the bread, and all the ultra-processed foods. So if I could give you any advice from the salt side of things, it would be reducing down the amount that you're eating or getting pre-prepared foods if you can cook from scratch. Add herbs and spices where you can, and also give it time, because we're really conditioned to like salty foods. Again, we're human, so we biologically crave it. And changing so you grow new taste buds on your tongue about every 2 to 3 weeks. So if you are reducing the salt that you eat, just stick with it, give it time, and you will crave the salt less. And then body composition. So again, this is a huge one that comes up around menopause, because we live in such a weight-centric society, and it's often, the number one outcome people want when they come to see a dietitian. And, the health side of things, the heart protection comes secondary to weight. And, weight tells us one piece of the puzzle in terms of your risk for heart disease and stroke. But I also want to know about all the other risk factors. So just to kind of put that out there, and there's a lot of weight stigma in our society still. So it's something that just weight, it's not the be all and end all. So we do see about a weight gain during pregnancy or during menopause, as you mentioned earlier. But we also see a change in shape as well, to a more fat distribution, like an apple shape rather than pear shape. So that's, again, kind of down to the estrogen acting effects, that we're having less estrogen, so we move away from the pear shape. In terms of what we can do is, these are very simple things, but they're shown to be very effective. Slowing down your meals. So taking 15 minutes to actually eat your meal, 15 to 20 minutes, especially for your dinner, trying to do it like without screens and just mindfully eating, it allows your brain to recognize you're eating, first of all, and it also helps you to monitor your brain to monitor how much you're eating. And similar as well with chewing. So most of us chew about 3 times before we swallow, but there's really good research to show that people who chew about 20 to 25 times per chew, it's actually really hard to do. So next time you're having a meal, just have a think about this. You'll eat about 10 to 12% less at that meal. So it's another way your brain uses to naturally regulate your appetite and just to eat the right amount for you. And also another really nice way of getting to know your body and understand your hunger and satiety cues is to use the hunger scale or the fullness scale. So trying to ask yourself next time you go into a meal, where am I out of 10 in the hunger scale? So if you're going into a meal on like a 1 out of 10 in terms of fullness, you're ravenous. That's the time where you tend to reach for the sugary foods or the high fat foods, because your survivalist brain kicks in. So if you can try and enter a meal around the 3 mark, 3 out of 10, you're not going to be ravenous, and try to exit a meal maybe around 7 or 8 out of 10. It just means you won't have that, Christmas Day uncomfortable feeling afterwards. And it allows you just to, have a more mindful experience of your meal and to really enjoy it. And sleep. I know I'm a dietitian, so I talk about food, but sleep is so important. If you're not getting enough sleep, I'm sorry, that sounds very like sleep is important. Of course, we all know that, but just to recognize that often some of the underlying issues with diet can actually be solved just by getting a good night's sleep. So if that's the most important thing for you to take away and nothing to do with the food side of things, well then focus on that. And we can get into portion size as well. And then the very last point I want to make is just about a little bit about physical activity to kind of lead you into the next talk. But obviously it's from a weight loss point of view, exercise and physical activity is not It's not a very effective way to lose weight, but it's a really, really important way to maintain your weight. And particularly as you go through menopause and your metabolic rate reduces and we lose muscle mass, we lose bone mass, we typically reduce our metabolic rate by about 10%. So by adding in strength training and also particularly anything that's weight bearing, so anything that's on your legs, whether it's walking, jumping, hiking, Pilates, yoga, whatever, that can also help to preserve your bone mass, but also to keep your muscle strength there and to preserve your metabolic rate. I will finish up by just saying we have a nurse's helpline there if you do have a specific medical question about heart disease and stroke. We have lots of heart healthy recipes on the irishheart.ie website. That journal is in your pack, and we also have lots of resources available on the new digital hub. I'll just leave you with a couple of ideas for ways you could bring simple changes into your day-to-day. Thank you.